Hello, and welcome to week 2 of English 1301. This week, we are beginning our second module, so we'll come down to essay number 2, evaluation essay. All right. Hopefully, everybody was able to get their narratives in. I'll be grading those and getting them back to you as soon as possible. Once I do, I will be opening up the revisions assignment down here in the assignments folder of Module 1. And once I open up the revisions, then you'll be able to revise your papers and resubmit them here. And I will have separate instructions once I open up the revisions there for you to follow. And those revisions will be due at the end of our semester, or at the end of this course for the semester. So you have plenty of time to get them in. Remember, there's revisions on essays number 1, 2, and 3, but not on 4. So make sure that you do your best work that you can on 4 because it acts as our final. All right, so let's talk about evaluation essays. So, what is an evaluation essay? Well, we evaluate things every day. You evaluate what you're going to wear in the morning. You evaluate how you're going to get out of bed. You make split-second decisions when you evaluate going through uh, intersection when you're driving in a car, right? You have to decide, is the light red? Is it green? Is there a light? Are there people waiting to cross the road? Is that truck going to stop or not that's going across traffic? All of these things we do in split seconds. So we evaluate all the time. And a lot of times we evaluate more than we even know. In fact, I think our entire life is spent evaluating from moment to moment what we're going to do. That's just how we operate as humans. So it should not be that big a deal to say we're going to be evaluating something. Um, let me see, I've got a lot of things open here. So let's go down here to what is an evaluation. So you're going to be asked to evaluate something. And in this particular module, what I've chosen is parenting methods. Now, I realize and understand that some of you might not be parents yet, so you have no idea. Some of you may have no intention of being parents at all. So you think, how is this going to apply to me? Some of you are already parents and you're like, oh, I know exactly what I would do because I've done it. That's actually cool. All of these perspectives bring good things and have good things to say about, or important things to say, I should say, about parenting methods in general. No matter whether you are a parent or not, no matter whether you were adopted or not, or you grew up with your biological parents, you have been parented somehow, some way, at some point. So you have a valid opinion on how parenting should go. So before anybody says, oh, I don't have any kind of valid opinion, you do. You absolutely do. And once you read through the different methods, you're going to have more opinions, which is what I basically based this paper on. So you're going to be asked to evaluate a modern parenting model, and it's going to be in one of the reading assignments that we'll have, and I'll show you that. And when you evaluate something, you're going to argue whether it's good or bad. You're basically giving your opinion based on evidence that you have. So it's like thumbs up or thumbs down. Um, and you have to take a stance with this evaluation. You can't just say, oh, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You're going to be asked to take a side to say whether or not you like it completely or not. I know that's seems a little, well, I'm not sure what it seems, but for the purposes of our class and our course, you're going to have to take a side because we're not really interested in whether or not the parenting methods are good or bad in the end of it all with this course is concerned. What I'm really concerned about is you being able to write a good evaluation that gives one side of something or another. Now, of course, there will be evaluations that you'll write in the future that probably are somewhere in the middle because that's just how the evaluation runs. But for this particular assignment, I really want you to take a side and argue what what one is better over the other. So, again, I'm not going to read this word for word, but you're going to have to frame your evaluation on some commonly held standards or criteria, and you're going to have to decide what that criteria is. Just like when you go to buy a cell phone, you have a certain amount of criteria when we're picking out a phone, right? We want to know. Uh, we want a phone that has a good battery life. We want a phone that has a good processor that would be able to do all the things that we want it to do in terms of searching the web, possibly even playing games on it, uh, being able to run all of our stuff. We want it to be able to run the app smoothly, right? We want good connectivity, so we want a good network. Like I said, I think we said battery time. We want a big battery that's going to last a long time so we don't have to charge it as much. We want to have good cameras so that when we do decide to record things or take pictures, they look professional and they look well done. We want a good microphone so people can hear us. We want good speakers so we don't sound like tinny nonsense when we're listening to it. And we want a lot of little different features. All of those things that we want that we consider when we're buying a phone, even the part where you actually talk to somebody on it, are considered criteria. All of those things, those standards that we have. That's what is criteria. And so, just like you have your own standards and criteria for buying things like phones, cars, whatever, you're going to have your own standards and criteria somewhat for what makes a good parent. And that's what you need to go by. So, you need to decide, is it the child's safety? Is it uh, preserving their intellectual curiosity? Is it their happiness? Are these things that you think are super important, or what do you think is the most important? And people are going to have different opinions, and that's okay because an evaluation is really based on your opinion with a little bit of evidence to back it up. So let's take a look at what an effective evaluation has. There's the basic features. You've got the introduction, where you talk about what's being evaluated, you give some context on it, and you offer your basic evaluation in your thesis statement. So that's your thesis statement is going to be your evaluation. And we'll talk about thesis statements here in a minute in more detail. The description of subject, which summarizes or describes the basic features of the subject being evaluated. Typically, you're going to use a feature by feature or a chronological description. Show that in a second as well. Your strengths and weaknesses, you are going to talk about what is good and what is bad, what is strong and what is weak. And obviously, if you like the parenting method, or yeah, when you're writing an evaluation like this, if you like it, you're going to focus on the strengths and you're going to say the strengths outweigh the weaknesses. If you don't like it, if you think it's not good, then you're going to focus on the weaknesses over the strengths. And in good argument, you always acknowledge that there are two sides to it. So there are good things and there are bad things. There are strengths and there are weaknesses in everything. So again, it just depends on whether your evaluation is ultimately good or bad, what wins out. Finally, your conclusion is you're going to represent your overall judgment and basically restate your thesis. And maybe even, you know, have a call to action for the audience. Maybe not so much in an evaluation because it's not really it's an argument, but it's not really the kind of argument where you're really trying to get people to do something or not. You're just basically giving, again, your opinion with some evidence. All right, so there's that. I have the basic features here marked and color coded just like we did the last one, uh, just because I like color coding a little bit. I think it's a good visual. But here we have the introduction, and there's actually two different ways of doing an evaluation, and I will leave it up to you as to which one you would like to do. But let's go over the first way. The first way up here is you have your, well, let's go about the way they are similar. There we go. You have the introduction, which provides background information. That's the same for both. And you're going to have your thesis statement at the end of your introduction because we are now writing more formal traditional essays. The last essay we wrote, the narrative, the autobiographical narrative, was less traditional. Um, it was kind of an informal formal essay, if you will. It was formal in the way that it was for an academic class. It was informal in that you were telling a story. So we didn't adhere to the same types of rules. Like, for example, your thesis statement could come at the end of the story because basically the thesis is the whole reason you're telling the story. It could have been the moral of the story, the point of the story. That was your thesis. You could state it at the beginning and then restate it at the end, and that would have been fine too. But for our purposes, we are now moved on to formal academic essays, and as such, we will be putting our thesis statement. You should be having an what's called an explicit thesis statement, meaning you are saying exactly what you're writing about at the beginning of the paper to let the reader know what to expect. It isn't until we get into some more sneakier ways of writing arguments that we get into implicit thesis statements. I mean, I guess you could argue that a narrative has an implicit thesis statement if you don't say it till the end. There's that. But for us, thesis statement for this paper goes at the end of the introduction. Then for both ways of writing this, you're going to have the description of subject, which is again a little bit different than you're used to writing if you're coming straight out of high school. You're going to take a paragraph or so and describe what it is you're talking about. You don't really want to do that in your introduction because that's giving the reader too much information all up front. An introduction should really be uh, kind of a hint about what you're talking about and your thesis statement, which answers the question, which would be the question is why, the whole reason you're writing the paper. The thesis statement is the answer to that question. So that's why we use this called the description of subject. It's just like I said, a paragraph talking about what it is. For this case, you would be discussing what type of parenting method you're talking about and giving some particulars about it. Just introducing the reader to that particular topic that you're writing about. Then we get into the body, which is the green section, the body of the papers. Now, again, this is where the two different ways diverge. And this is where you're going to discuss the evidence that you used in your thesis statement back in the introduction. And that's just pretty typical of any paper that you write. So for the first type of evaluation, you can discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the three different points of evidence. Because remember, for a thesis statement, you need to have at least 3 points of evidence. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute when we talk about thesis statements. So you're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the feature 1, strengths and weaknesses of feature 2, strengths and weaknesses of feature 3. The three things, in this case, it's going to be the three reasons why you like or dislike the parenting method that you choose to write about. It could be literally anything that's contained within that, but that would be the body of your paper. Obviously, if you like the parenting method, the strengths are going to outweigh the weaknesses. And if you don't like it, the weaknesses are going to outweigh the strengths. That's the first way of doing it, an evaluation. The second way of doing an evaluation is to break it up a little bit differently. The same body, you're still talking about the 3 points of evidence that you're going to use, but instead you're going to talk about the strengths of the subject first, and then the weaknesses, and then you're going to weigh the strengths versus the weaknesses. Now, you could mix it up and talk about the weaknesses first and then the strengths and then weigh them out against each other. It's really up to you and your style. And also depending on which one you're going for. Again, if you are saying it's great, then maybe you follow up with the strengths last. If you think it's worse, maybe you follow up with the weaknesses last before you weigh in on the strengths and weaknesses together. It's really up to you. I kind of like this type of evaluation a little bit more than the first one, but there are times when the first one is just easier to write. It again is really up to you. I do not take sides just because I prefer one way or the other. I give you the option, and it's really up to you to make a case for it. But either one is acceptable, absolutely. And then finally, they both share the conclusion where you're going to restate your thesis and wrap up your paper, right? So again, you can always end with a question. In this case, it might be, you know, what parenting method would you choose? That's something like that. You don't have to if it feels a little corny to you. I understand. But those are the basic features of an evaluation, and this is what we're going to expect. You're going to need to expect your paper to uh, kind of follow. All right. So, what makes an effective introduction? All right. You need to have your topic area and context, right? You need to mention your topic area and context for sure. There's always uh, the attention grabber, your hook, if you will. I'm sure you've heard of that. I say don't stress over a hook. That is the one piece of advice I wish I could take out of everyone's head that your middle school teacher put into your head and your high school teacher probably uh, reiterated, which is you have to have a good hook or no one will read your paper. Well, that is true, I would say, because as we can see from headlines and uh, clickbait these days, you have to have something that people are going to want to click on. So if you don't have something that people are going to want to click on, they're not going to want to read your paper. But if I could roll it back, I would say don't stress about the hook. Uh, if you can find a clever way to get people's attention, that's great. I'm more interested in your actual evaluation and how that works. You can have a direct or implied question, which would be the whole reason that you're writing the paper. So you do need to let your readers know what that is. In this case, it would be which parenting method is good, or what do you think of a particular parenting method? That's the question you're going to be answering. Uh, there's you need an indication of how it invites tension or has evoked controversy or is otherwise problematic. For example, some people like this or some people don't like this. That could be part of your hook, actually. There should be included an indication of how it's significant or worth examining, right? To avoid the so what response. So, why should I care about this? Is basically what it amounts to. Why should your readers care about it? Why is it important to understand different parenting methods? I know it's not one of the big uh, topics of today, but I think it's a fundamental one. And you can even go with something like that. And then finally, your thesis statement, which brings something new to the audience. Once you've started to answer the question, or once you've told them what the question was, you're ready to give them the answer. And again, your thesis statement is the answer. So you can take a look at this. Again, it's here under effective introduction. Here's some best practices. And I'm certainly not going to read through this, but it is worth reading, probably as just additional reading. But it talks all about the structure of an evaluation essay. So there you go. Now you are going to need to use some evidence to back up your opinion, and that evidence is going to have to come from the actual uh, article that you're going to be reading. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about thesis statements since I promised we would. Now, if you come up here to writing resources, under the general writing help lives a very important, actually not that one, as a very important formula. It's something I wish that somebody would have taught me when I was in school, and then I would not have hated writing papers as much. But it is my own personal patented, developed magic thesis formula. And this magic thesis formula will work for any subject in any class for any time you have to write a paper. First, you have to understand that you are writing a paper. Your thesis is the answer to a question that is asked and never a question itself. And the question that you're answering is usually the prompt, the whole reason for writing the paper in the first place. So, whatever the prompt is, that's the question you're answering, right? It doesn't have to be long for most essays, one or two sentences tops. For our essays, more than likely it will be in one sentence. That would be appropriate. And this is what the formula looks like. The answer to the question is blank because of blank, blank, and blank, which is why it's called a formula, because you're going to plug in that information. So, for a paper like your parenting methods, it would be the parenting method I like best is blank because of blank, blank, and blank. Or the parenting method I do not like the most is blank because of blank, blank, and blank. And these three blanks are the three pieces of evidence that you're going to use from the article about the parenting method that you're going to read. And those are the three things that you will talk about in the body of your essay. And these are the three things that the strengths and weaknesses are going to come from. So I hope this helps. I hated writing thesis statements, but you can't have a paper without one. And it needs to be at the end of your introduction so that it's very clear what you are writing about. Again, the magic thesis formula can be found in the general writing help, and I will probably put that in here about where to find the magic thesis formula. It's important because we are going to be writing a thesis to turn in. All right, so taking a look at what we've got here, we've got a couple different things that are going to be very important. Here, the parenting method articles. These are the articles we'll be working with this module. There are 3 different articles, and for this paper, you're going to be choosing one. Well, you need to read all 3, I think, for one of the assignments. One of the assignments is reading all 3 so that we make sure that you've read them all. And there is a video with this one. There's not videos with all of them, but they're right here. There's the actual essay or article that I want you to read. That's the first one. The second one is here. And the third one is here. And I want you to notice something on each of these, which will be important when you're actually writing your paper, and I will most likely mention it next week as well. The works cited entry is listed on all of these articles so that you don't have to try and guess and figure out what it is. It is on the article. So, first things first is you're going to read all 3 articles, and they're right here underneath the assignments. And this is what we'll be working with for the assignments for this week, also for your essay. Here I have recommended readings, and for this week, we have what is basically an evaluation. It's a movie review, which is an evaluation. And this one is a particular, this particular review was a magazine style review about The Phantom Menace when it came out, so many years ago. And I want you to read through it and see if it follows the basic features of an evaluation. It does, but I want you to see how it does because it does take more than 1 or 2 paragraphs for the introduction and a lot more for the other parts. And that's okay because of the nature of it. Also, I want you to notice that it's not actually properly punctuated because it is a magazine article and it was designed more to sell magazines than it was to be academic. So, but it's still a good example. And if you really want to, you can click on the link and it still goes to the original article, which came out in 1999. It was updated about 10 years later, uh, but yeah, it's kind of old, but it's still a good example. So, again, recommended reading just gives you an example of an evaluation. Um, so, let's get into the assignments. All right, the assignments for this week. Again, there are 4 assignments that'll be due at the end of this week, and then your essay next week. But let's take a look. So the first one is Chapter 17, Evaluations. It's not very long. It's the questions and comments as last time, and it's going to give you basically an overview of what what evaluations are. There is an evaluation, another example of an evaluation essay here. Again, it is another basically a movie review, and you can read it for your edification. This it's really not part of what I really wanted you to read, but you can take a look at it if you want to. Really, I find it more important to read about the key features, which is here. But the third page down, it's on page 215. Um, but key features of evaluations, again, it's going to reiterate a lot of the things I've said, but I think it's important to do that. And then there's a brief guide to writing evaluations, which could help you uh, with when you sit down to write to make sure that you've got everything that you need to to do this well. And again, it's just not very long. It's just a few clicks, but be sure that you do your questions and comments based on that. And that's going to be our first assignment. The second assignment, arguably the more important of them, is the summaries. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to that uh, reading art folder in the main part of Module 2, and you're going to read each of the different essays, all 3 of them, and you're going to write a brief summary. And you can check out Chapter 3 in our book for writing summaries, but you need to make sure that you include key points and the name of the article and the name of the author. Points will be taken off if you don't include these, for sure, these 2 things for each article. You're going to write 3 summaries. So you must write a summary over all 3 articles. So it doesn't have to be very long, just about a paragraph about what it's about and the name of the article and the name of the author. Okay, make sure you're practicing your MLA format here, and that's going to be this assignment. Third, we are venturing into AI a little bit. So hopefully, none of us used AI to write our autobiographical narrative. That would be kind of sad and tragic. But I certainly don't want you to start writing it now with AI. So I do want you to be able to use AI responsibly for this class. Cleaning up your work is not a responsible use for it. Correcting your work is not a responsible use for it because that's what we're learning to do in this class. For other classes, maybe. I can't say what their policies are, but for mine, remember, any indication of AI use is subject to a more thorough review and a run through other programs. And if I find a percentage that is unacceptable, which is basically anything over 0, um, then points will be deducted if not a complete 0 given. So please don't do that. But you can use AI to help you with your paper in other ways. For example, planning your essay, which is what this particular assignment's about. So this is to help you plan your assignment. You can organize your evaluated essay using an AI tool of your choice. So that's really what you need to do. You need to find something that you like to work with, whether it's uh, ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini or Grok. Find an AI tool that you like. I prefer it to not be Grammarly, because Grammarly tends to just write papers for you. And probably anything on Chegg is probably not good for you in the long run, anyways. ChatGPT is certainly free to use. Most of these are free to use for the most part. Gemini's actually pretty good, Google being what it is. So just choose one. So, what you're going to do is you're going to need to write your working thesis first. So, make sure you do this assignment after you do your working thesis. And then you're going to use AI to help you plan your essay. So, you're going to submit at least 3 prompts to the AI and the full responses that you received from AI. And you're going to highlight or annotate which parts of the responses you found useful or adapted for your plan. Um, so basically, you're just going to be, you're probably going to take a lot of screenshots for this particular assignment. And you can either put them all in one document or you can just submit the screenshots. And then I say at least 3 prompts, just you don't have to go crazy with it, but I say the full responses, yeah, the full first response is probably fine. You're going to create an essay planning outline. So, using what you gathered from your AI plus your own thinking, create a bullet point outline of your essay. And this is where your AI really shines. And you can ask it to do that. It should have your introduction with your thesis. It's going to be 2 or 3 main body points with the topic sentences based on your thesis. And remember, you need to have 3 points of evidence for that. A counter argument in argumentative essays, and which is not really for this one, but you can use these steps to help you with future essays. And that's the key thing here. So that's why I included that there. And then a note about what evidence you might use from your articles. And then last but not least, a reflective paragraph saying, what did you find helpful? Uh, do you think it was helpful? If it wasn't, that's okay too. Some people really don't like using AI and they find it somewhat offensive, which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't think anybody would be offended about being asked to use AI, but I did have students that were. So tell me what you think. So you're going to turn in your working thesis, the 3 AI prompts, the annotations or highlights showing what you used, the outline of your essay, and a reflective paragraph. So this is a working outline and it's subject to change however you need it to change. So it's not written in stone. If you decide that you don't want to use that outline for your essay, that's okay. The practice here was for this particular assignment was using AI to help you in ways other than just writing your paper for you. And here are some examples of the prompts that you can put in. And if you like any of these, you can use them or you can put in your own. Remember, you may not use AI to write paragraphs, introductions, conclusions, or full sections of your essay at all, but you can use it to help you plan it. And that's a good deal of the work for the paper done already. So there you go. That is that assignment. And then, of course, the final assignment for this week is going to be the evaluation essay itself. And I'm going to move that up so that hopefully you can do these in order. If you were doing them in order, you would do the evaluation working thesis. So what I'd like for you here is to actually give me your working thesis. Based on that thesis formula, it's the answer to the question, which is which parenting method do you evaluate uh, as good or bad? Which one do you like the most, or which one do you hate the most? And it could be which one you hate the most because you might feel so strongly about one of them that you're like, no, that's absolutely not okay, and the reasons why. And then you need 3 points of evidence from the article, and that's going to be your working thesis. And if you turn that in, the sooner you turn that in, the sooner I will grade it and get it back to you so that you can work on your papers. I will guarantee that I will have these graded for you before next Sunday so you can start working on your essays when you want to. And that finally takes us to the actual essay itself. So again, 750 words, an evaluation essay of a parenting model discussed in one of the readings. And those are the 3 readings right there. So you're going to use the basic features of the evaluation. Make sure that your thesis statement's at the end of your introduction. And there's some things that I would like for you to keep in mind. First of all, this is not a compare and contrast. We are not comparing one method to another. We are simply choosing one to talk about. So do not mention other parenting methods in your evaluation. You are not evaluating them. You're going to choose one parenting method to evaluate and focus on that. That's the first thing. The second thing is that all of your evidence for your evaluation must come from the article. Again, all evidence for your evaluation must come from the article. You will have no other outside sources other than the article. If you bring in other outside sources, I will invalidate that information in your essay and take points off. This is not about who can go out and write the best essay based on information out on the internet. This is about your evaluation of a parenting method based on solely on what you've read about it in an article that I have provided. So we're really practicing close reading and your ability to formulate opinions and evaluations based on what you read. So make sure that you don't do that. Uh, there's going to be this is the criteria that I have for your paper, how clear and focused the thesis statement is, how well the essay conforms to the basic features of an evaluation, how well the quotes from the reading are integrated into the essay. And that is some MLA information that we'll probably go over next week. But yes, if you're quoting from the essay, you need to make sure you're quoting it properly. How well your evaluation is supported with your reasonable assertions and evidence from the article. How well the essay uses clear, coherent, complete, and correct sentences. How well you conform to MLA documentation and formatting. And that you include a works cited page and a word count. You will have a works cited page. It's going to be the article that you're going to be using. And remember, the works cited entry for that article is on the article itself in Blackboard. So there you go. And that will be due uh, the week after next. So, or after this week. So there you go. And we will go over these again and MLA formatting for quotations and works cited next week. So there you have it. Week 2, or I'm sorry, week 3. And if you have any questions, be sure to email me. Stay warm and have a good week.